Nagin. I'm a comedian and I'm an author. And I've written 5 books. My recent book is called the Book of Outcasts. It's a collection of short stories. And I perform stand-up all over the U.S., mostly on the East Coast right now. So that's a little bit of a background.
Amazing, amazing. And so, in terms of this book, what was your process for writing it? Was it something you were writing around gigs? Was it something you sat down and sort of focused on for a few months or something? Yeah.
Well, look, to be honest, this is different stories I wrote over a longer period of time. So some of them are more current, and some of them are older stories that I revamped and changed over time. So my process often involves writing something, putting it away, then picking it up again and tinkering with it and refining it until I feel it's what I'm looking for, or it's projecting what I'm trying to get across in that story. But I kind of go, this sounds a little wonky, but it's a little bit like the muses are, I don't know, that's Stephen Pressfield stuff. So I kind of feel like the story should tell me what it's about more than I should direct it, if you get what I mean. Yeah. I'm sort of trying to be a vessel for the characters or follow the characters, or there's a degree of editing and whatnot, but I'm trying to stay true to what I think this story is about. And it's for me, I'm total pantser. It's a kind of finding it on the way kind of thing.
Nice. And so when you start writing a story, what do you start with? Do you start with a character, with a plot, with a setting? What's your usual route in, or does it change completely time to time?
It does change. I'll give you an example. I don't usually talk about stuff I'm doing now, but I have some new. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it's just I just start writing. I don't even know where it is. I just start writing randomly. But there are times where something jogs my mind as a possible story. Like, to give you an example, I don't usually talk about stuff I'm working on, but I'll make an exception. I was walking in this park in Birmingham. I'm in Alabama. It's not like your Birmingham. It's another Birmingham we have here. And there was this mother. She was rather attractive. She had 2 kids. But there was something sad about her face, whatever it was. And I was looking at her and I'm thinking, it's a basic storyline, but I'm thinking, oh, this would be an interesting storyline about some creepy guy who wants to have this affair with her, and she's like elitist and he's a little bit lower brow, but he just, even though he's creepy, almost seems like a stalker freak, she starts falling for him. There's something about it in her for her. Maybe it's the adventure and her stultified life, but she still falls for, and it's the different perspectives that I think would be interesting, because the man, in his mind, she might be interested, but in her mind, oh, he's disgusting, but then she starts coming around. Anyway, they're just the different vantage points. Like, for that story could be good, seeing the play, and that's a basic storyline, and I'm sure that other things can develop, but that's an example of something where it's an idea, or I saw someone, and now maybe it would develop into a story.
You've written poetry, you're a comedian as well. When you have an idea, how do you know that's fiction, that's poem, that's comedy? Like, what's the process for those those different threads?
Well, for me, they're very different worlds, because certain things just feel more like, I guess over time having done it, certain things I know, boom, I've already compartmentalized it. This is a joke, this is a poem. And I usually don't start writing something and it becomes a poem that is a story. They're just like almost different, it's almost like different forms of radio. Like, are you going to turn into this channel on Opie and Anthony on Sirius, or are you going to watch Howard Stern or CNN or whatever it is? it's a different frequency. So it's just I'll be working on a different frequency. I don't know how to say it better than that. Sorry.
No,
I
that
don't know if
makes
you're
a
a
lot of
writer.
sense,
How
right?
does it work for you? Because you're a writer too, and you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's kind of the same, right? You sort of know when it even if it only arrives as a tiny idea, it's a tiny idea in a particular form, right? It's
Mhm.
yeah. No, I
Mhm.
think you do a bit of you do some screenwriting as well, right? Or
Well, I've written a couple of scripts. I never had anything produced or
mhm,
anything except for my own short films. You know,
mhm,
I made short film that did some festivals, and I have another one, but they were really, you know, I have written a couple of scripts, but I haven't gotten them made
mhm,
into films and stuff, like full length scripts. So I've done a little of that, not in recent times.
mhm. But would that be? Would
But
you say that was the same? Those ideas they come as this is something that's got to be people visual. This isn't on the page anymore, kind of thing.
mhm. um, I think so. Sometimes an idea seems, but some of those, of course, could be, could become a novel or something
Hmm.
like that as well. But I guess the way I work, if I'm starting to write a script, I'm thinking of it specifically as a script, like as a film.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it will have cinematic elements. Now, some people have said, I don't know if it's accurate, that some of my writing has a cinematic aspect.
Hmm.
Some of it, some of it. So maybe there's a crossover, but I'm not writing it in my mind like this is script. I'm writing it as a story.
Hmm.
Like when I'm writing this last book, the Book of Outcasts. It's a story.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
So.
very, the writing's very evocative, right? It's very, there is, I see what you mean by that. There is sort of a cinematic quality to it. I think, especially a few of the stories that very much have like a thriller sort of air to them, kind of thing. There's those tropes and those kind of characters
Mm-hmm,
and settings
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
the sort of very much work on the screen, right? And it's very much fun to have those in a condensed 20-page story, right? From boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
a very fun way to read.
Well, I appreciate that, and I love your review. It was very interesting. Like I said, your review is the most dynamic one, and it brought in a lot of the stuff, the politics,
Hmm.
and then also you had some interesting insights with the picaresque and the noir, and
Hmm.
I didn't always. It's hard to analyze your own writing because my process is very internally driven.
Hmm.
So sometimes, how to explain it? You never know how people are going to take things
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because it's sometimes, for example, something I don't even mean as possibly offensive, someone else could find offensive, or and vice versa,
Hmm.
or something that maybe I think is edgier doesn't bother anybody. It's a weird dynamic. I don't know if you have that
Yeah.
as well.
No, I did,
You-
but I know what you mean, right? But you can when someone's writing something, you can tell all they care about is the reader rather than the writing. It's stuff suffers, right? It's if you go into
Mhm,
writing anything and
mhm.
all you're thinking about is, oh, how is this going to be responded to? What are people going to think about this? It kind of just withers on the page. I think
Exactly.
it's got to come from within for it to work. I think a lot of the time.
I agree 100%. That's always been my process, and then I try to stay true to that. But sometimes it is difficult because sometimes you're like, "Wow, this story goes." I'll give you an example. The story you read about the compulsive gambler, the
Mhm.
Valley of Darkness.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned it, and there was a part where the guy punches his wife in the face, which I was like, oh man, do I really need to go this far to have him, in this
Mhm. Yeah.
altercation, and then he's pawning the baby, and that for some reason was less, just the domestic violence, because I'm obviously against that
Mhm.
personally in real life, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I felt the story needed to explain the character and his desperation. Like this
Mhm.
is something this crazy guy would do
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in desperation to pay back his debts. At least as I was conceiving it. Now I
Yeah.
could be wrong. So, but there's a lot of stuff like that with fiction where you're like, wow, did I go too far here? did I say something? Did I cross the line? Or,
Mhm.
but a lot of the time, I personally think that's part of, like you said, what makes it interesting
Mhm.
for the reader. Some readers won't like it
Yeah.
because, but at least it's genuine to what you're trying to convey. That's
Yeah.
how I go about it.
But I mean, you can also fit if it's the other direction. It can be pretty boring too, right? If someone is they're trying, oh, this is the most offensive thing I can think of. This is and it's that's
Right,
that's
right, true. It can be gratuitous.
exactly exactly.
That is true too. But I mean, that's why it's got to be true to your best of your ability.
Hmm.
True, in my opinion, true to the character or the situation. If it's true to what the character, if it feels right, and it's only by instinct. I mean, didn't Hemingway say that, right? The most important thing
Hmm.
for a writer is a constant built-in shock-proof shit detector. So does it feel, real to what this character would do? And then sometimes I'm sure I get it wrong, but that's what I'm at least going for more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's yeah, I think that's the way. That's where interesting writing comes from. It
Mhm.
doesn't
Okay.
it doesn't come from trying to please everyone all the time,
Right.
right?
Right. Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page on that. Interesting.
To go back to the book, it's a collection of stories. Pretty much all of them are, I'd probably say, are kind of tragedies, right? It's someone's life
Hmm.
pretty much falling apart. So you said it was lots of stories that you'd written over a longer period of time. Was that
Hmm.
everything you sort of had in the bank, or you picked these stories from sort of a few other pieces, because they all had that sort of tragedy within them as narratives? Which, yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. No, I have other stories, but some of them weren't complete. These are some of the strongest that I wanted to put in. And then, yes, there was a bit of a theme, but
Mhm.
not all of them were. I think most are sort of tragedies, but I
Mhm.
could think of one or two that were. I forget the visitation, for example. It's like more comedic, where the guy,
Mhm.
his relative, comes down and um, has this wild tale of going to a distant planet where they're all engaging cannibalism and stuff, and he thinks he's delusional. So that one, I mean, yeah, I guess it's a little bit tragic because he's a little out of his mind,
Mhm.
um, but I think with this one again, it was I wanted to put out a short story collection, and it took a while to figure out what the title would be.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like I came out and started and say, let me write a book called The Book of Outcasts.
Mhm.
That wasn't my personal process. I just had stories that I wanted to put into a collection, and then I was trying to figure out what the title would be. And then it occurred to me, The Book of Outcasts is an interesting, just something I thought
Mhm.
was interesting. It's something classical because it's like calling it a book. You don't see that much. So I just said, hey, that's an interesting title. And these characters are, a lot of them, outsiders or
Mhm.
estranged from society in various ways, or even like the first one, Flames of Nirvana, they're not really estranged. They're actually somewhat of conventional marriage, but they're estranged from each other, I guess,
Mhm.
even though, so it's not all, there are, of course, like the guy who's in jail for, killing his daughter. And there's that level of outcasts. So it runs the gamut.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it was just a process over time of saying, okay, this could be a title, and then these are stories that would work well under this or that fit well. And I took some time also to figure out the arrangement was unusual because someone said, oh, I should put some of the, like a lot of people like the Nagin versus Nagin story. I'll put that at the
Mhm.
beginning or put that at the end or something. But for some reason, I don't know. I felt like it was good just in the middle. I don't know. I can't explain it. Sometimes like I said, my process is very intuitive and it's nonlinear,
Mhm.
and I can't always explain some of it. And that's same with comedy. Why do I think this is funny versus that? I don't know. It's just I go with what's in my gut, and I'm
Mhm.
hoping that's right.
I like the structure. I thought that story Nagin versus Nagin. I tried to like describe it when I was like write my blog post about it. I found it quite difficult to describe without just going overboard. I mean, do you want to describe that? It's
Right.
a super interesting story, very postmodern.
Hmm.
Very. Do you want to sort of summarize that and
Hmm.
we'll talk about that a bit more.
Hmm. I mean, it's definitely metafiction.
Hmm.
it's I guess a war of a spiritual war or a creative war between a character named Nagin, which happens to be my name, my last name, and his doppelganger, and they're both writers, and they're both sort of trying to climb the rung to get acclaim to to play against each other, but they get into kind of a furious battle to one up each other with kind of crazy consequences. And he's trying to steal, one of them's trying to steal the other's wife. But that's you know, if someone said, is that like a metaphor for your own internal battle? I mean, you could read it in a lot of different ways. I'm not really sure, but I think I meant some of it as comedic, for sure, obviously, and some of it as, you know, there's many ways you take it, but a commentary a little bit on social media, on bots, on AI, you know, on the simulacrum that are going on now, and the way there are prototypes of ourselves, and where can we find authenticity? Where is authenticity in this crazy world where there are so many replications and things are so performative? You know, so and packaged.
Yeah.
Like, where is it? You know, so
just the edges are cut off. I think with a lot of online culture, everything is people become extreme versions of themselves online, which yeah.
And that can also be an issue. Maybe when I didn't even think, but with my creative stuff, like you said, the edges are cut off is a great idea. Because a lot of my creative stuff has a lot of edge, you know, so I guess maybe I'm reacting to that. And also, a lot of it has become very superficial and surface, and but yeah, I like edges. Yeah. I like messiness. I like, I don't know, I like things going awry a little bit. And like you had said, I think in the review, that it has sort of, I guess there is an interest, or people will have, like, it's a little bit of debauchery or a little bit of, sometimes that can be fun for a reader. I don't know, hopefully.
I feel particularly with like AI, it's the interesting stuff is lost. Like I find like newspapers, magazines, online, they're just pumping stuff out from these AI farms. Is that the right word? But there's no character to them, right? But that's the point. But then what's the point of reading something if there's no voice to it? I don't know. It's I think it's a bit it's frustrating, because I don't think anyone wants to just read articles online that lack personality, but it seems to be what everyone's acquiescing to at the moment. I don't know. It's
No, 100%. And I've noticed that well, there's a certain push and a certain power to the surface level productivity, and there's become, and I think a lot of creativity now. I mean, let's say something everyone gets, Netflix, right, or Amazon. A lot of their productions are sort of farm-based kind of productions, and I'm not saying there's not great shows, but if I look at this period compared to like films of the 70s, there seems to be a lot lacking, and it's some of that stuff. There's less the edge, there's less depth, there's less maybe humanity or something. Something's going on where it's too safe and sanitized and not alive enough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just from my taste. And there's exceptions, of course.
No, I mean, it just feels like generally there's less risks being taken, right, in sort of the creative industries at the moment. I think, like, I saw a trailer yesterday for an Owen Wilson sitcom about golf. You know, does anyone want that? Is that something people are screaming for? You know, it's I can see why it would tick some boxes on a
right.
It's like this, it's like this, it's like this. But is that going to be risky and interesting? No, it's not. You know, I don't. Yeah. Exactly,
and then some of the sales flounder, and they wonder why. Or obviously all these Marvel. I'm not a big Marvel and that because again, it doesn't seem like the characters are real.
Yeah.
Like if everything's superheroes, I want to see characters with foibles and flaws
Mm-hmm.
and great, because a lot of people are enduring that. I'm not saying I'm the mouthpiece for that. I'm just saying what I enjoy consuming is that the people that don't have it all together, or there's kind of a madness to it, because also society is in a bit of a mad period, and so if we're not acknowledging that, or at least that those characters are out there, then we're missing a big part of the picture, I think. No.
I mean, I think the argument that people make is that people want the escapism, but do they, or is that just all that's on offer at the cinemas on the streaming services kind of thing? I don't know. It's it doesn't feel like a very fertile time for creativity. But then again, obviously, there's so much sort of independent literature. There's increasingly there's access to short films, to indie cinema online, and I don't think anyone's making much money from being an entry level musician, but you can get your music heard all over the world pretty easily. But so there's both too many options and not enough at the same time. It's like I was at an exhibition in central London recently in one of the big galleries, and it had lots of videos in it that were like opera from the 1970s, but they were all things that had been filmed and put on TV, which there were like 3 TV channels in the 70s, and one of them was showing opera every weekend, which is quite like you couldn't find that now kind of thing. And it's strange how culture it's not as open as it was in many ways. There's not the opportunities for people to encounter things that are interesting, a limit, and like unless you're making the effort, it doesn't happen by accident anymore, which is strange.
That's right. No, 100%. I think there's been a shift, but I do think comedy, for some reason, it has been an interesting outlet recently because a lot of it is because you can indie produce and people put out their YouTube specials, or for example, with free speech, I think there's a little bit. Now I know people say it gets abused, and then it's just that's gratuitous or it's hate speech or whatever. But I just think sometimes I see more interesting things that are outside, let's say, the normal parameters where it's in that space right now. And I personally think that could be part of why it's very popular, because everything in the mainstream corporate world has become very sanitized and too, like you said, too safe, too predictable. And so people, I think, are actually looking for. I'm not sure about in literature, but at least in general in the arts, I do think people, at least certain people, want something a little more raw or a little bit more honest, or that's outside these pre-programmed channels. If you get, and I see a reaction also against AI. I've noticed. Like people are getting mad. James Frey, I don't know if you saw that. He said he admitted his book was written with AI and he wasn't making apologies, and there was kind of a backlash. I mean, he said he controlled which AI he used. So, but I mean, and he also put his own. But like, personally, I wouldn't do that. I would never write anything. I would just feel ashamed of myself. That would defeat the whole purpose.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess some people, I don't know. I guess everyone has their own technique. I don't know how you're feeling on that.
No, I mean, I agree. I agree. I think it defeats the purpose. My wife is like an academic university professor, and like she's been marking like first year essays like the last few weeks, and like 90% of them are just putting in stuff made with AI, and it's like, well, like every time she talks about it, I'm like, well, why are they bothering to do it? Like the point of going to university isn't to have some essays, it's like it's the process that's the point, and I think people forget that, right? It's like a book written by AI. Like what's it for? What has the world gained by that? Some text on a page. It's I'm sure there will be things that are interesting, but if they happen by AI, it's by accident. It's not by design. It's about finding. It's just doing things that have been done before. It can't be original, and people need originality. People need expression, and that sense.
And even if it's original, the main issue, the main, I think part of what attracts people to something is someone's connection to the words. It's not actually the words. It's just they're just an allude. It's all. That's why I look at this stuff almost like mystically. It's like your own process that you put in is what makes it. It's not. It's like looking at the external version of something, the completed project. It's not really about the completed project. It's about what the person did to get to the completed project. I don't know if you get what I mean, but it's exactly. That's part. That becomes part of it, and so that really bothers me. And also that fact that it's basically just stealing from every other author. So if it's like combine Fitzgerald and Hemingway in a great novel called The Sun Also Gatsby or something, and I get it. It could do it. Yeah. But it's basically just taking Hemingway's work and Fitzgerald's and making some, things. If it didn't have those, it wouldn't. So it is kind of, that's another issue I have with it. So I understand technology moves ahead, but I have a lot of reservations. As you saw from that, get your implant story about some of the ways it's gone.
I think it's all going to defeat the purpose of itself. Like if all that is on, if the streaming service is, it's no real actors, it's no real writers, it's no real directors, it's just background noise, right? It's not creativity, it's not art. I mean, not that all television is art, but it's made by people so that there is input. Whereas if there's no input at all, I don't know. I mean, there must be enough people that are happy with that slop for it to exist. So maybe
true.
Need audiences with higher standards. How would you define an outcast? What makes
define an outcast? Yeah. Well, someone who is someone alienated from society. It doesn't have to be someone who is necessarily like a leper or ostracized. I think personally, the way I view it, at least the way I'm talking about it in the book, is it can be a psychological vibe. For example, there could be somebody who's decently popular in a high school situation, but he's watching how others are behaving and he's alienated from it, or he doesn't feel like he fits in. So it's an internal feeling that you don't belong in groups or structures or society, or that and also that your values are not at all aligned with what we would call mainstream.
Would you consider yourself an outcast, or not at all?
To a certain extent. This book is fiction, even though what I try to do is make it feel real. And there's always a little of yourself, and I'm not going to say that, but those are fictional stories. Sometimes people say, "Has this really happened to you?" And what I try to do is make it feel real, but it's not actual,
of course.
real stuff. So, but I think to an extent, I'll put it this way: like I said, psychologically, for sure, I've always felt more comfortable a little bit on the side, a little bit of stretch. And that also gives you a good, I think, vantage point for creativity. So like with comedy, a lot of comedy is coming from that you're looking at things differently than others. That's a lot of the source of jokes, I think. That it's like a twist on how people look at it, and you're looking at it that way. So to an extent, I'd say my family structure was kind of conventional growing up. So from that, it depends on, there's definitely way more outcasty people than me. I'm actually somewhat regimented, somewhat regular in certain ways. But I'm a little bit of an oddball, and at least psychologically, I'd say yes. I consider myself that way. So
You're traveling a lot for gigs. How do you how do you feel arriving in a new place sort of multiple times a week?
well, just traveling and, or like for stand up or just in general, I really enjoy it, especially if it's somewhere I haven't been. Creatively, I think it's empowering. You get new sensory input. So usually there's an influx of ideas or thoughts. A lot of my time, if I have free time, of thinking of bits or ideas or different concepts might. So I think it's an asset. It's an asset, like the ways like Edgar Allan Poe drank. I guess that became a deficit at a certain point. But or the way, didn't Coleridge use opium or something? Whatever. that the way some writers might do that, travel can also provide a different perspective on cultures, different things to write about, different vantage points. So I really enjoy traveling personally.
How much of a change is there sort of between the South and New York and?
Well, there, it's huge. As you can imagine, I'm sure you get the movies and the stereotypes, but it's not all, performing for 2 pigs and 3 chickens. It's no, they have some culture here. They have, it's not huge, but different places, even within the South, has a lot of variety because there's a lot of history. So Alabama and Mississippi can be very different in different areas, or Florida or Georgia. So actually, just being down here, as I've only been down here 3 years, has been quite a cultural shift. I mean, like I know you mentioned the politics, for example, from New York and Philadelphia to Alabama is pretty night and day. So I find that's another thing. I always like different places. Part of it, that's not why I moved here. It was a relationship, but it just ended up staying here. But the shift and those changes creatively, whether writing or whatever kind of art you're doing, I think is very helpful. Very helpful. And again, I think it's good to be a bit of an outsider, an outcast creatively. I'm talking about. So being an outcast, I'm a bit of an outcast. You're like a Jewish guy in the Bible Belt. There's not a lot of, but that I find that helpful.
You mentioned you were working on a new story. Is that are you working on lots of new pieces? Have you got a new sort of project in mind, or just as it comes, new work?
Okay, I wrote 2 new stories. Then that other one is like a third that I'm. So, but honestly, that's like sort of my side quest, because I have 3 other books that I want to put out. Basically, my next projects are, I'm trying to finish up this short film I did. This is like a 7-minute film, and I'm almost basically finished. And then I have 3 other books, and 2 are novels, and one is, I don't want to say it's a memoir, but it's like comedic essays that are, it's not fiction, put it that way, but it's not really a comprehensive memoir. It's just separate little comedic incidents, I guess you call it, or things. So, yeah, that's my goal, ideally, to put those 3 out. But meanwhile, I've been, always try to keep working, writing other stuff. And I have this new story that I think is pretty strong. I hope it's about But it would fit into the Book of Outcasts. It's mostly done so I can talk about it. It's about a guy with nut cancer, as he refers to it, and he doesn't have long to live. And a Jehovah's Witness comes to his door to, proselytize, and he's far gone. You're in a little in his head about how anti this religious stuff, and he's doing blow there and calling him a dweeb, and he invites him in, and he goes through his life a little bit, and he has this crazy hookup with this secretary. But anyway, he goes through a whole thing, but at the end of the story, he lasts longer than he's supposed to with the cancer for 2 years. That when the same person comes back to his door, he's ready to turn his will over and accept God. It sounds like a crazy arc, but it kind of works in this story. Like, he changes his whole attitude because of what he goes through, so that by the end, this guy who he was totally dismissing, he embraces, in a sense. So I don't know. I'm hoping that one people will like. Well, we'll see. You never know with this stuff.
Nice. And are you acting in the short film you're doing as well?
That one we filmed. It's just the editing, but yeah, I acted in it. It's called Sorry, Mom. That one is a real simple film. It wasn't even meant to be. It was meant to be a sketch, really, and then I was like, oh, this could be a short film. It's just, there's a personal aspect. My mother died 3 years ago, so it's like, and I always had issues with her. So it's called Sorry, Mom, and it's this mother character and like a wayward son doing things the mother doesn't like, and there's like the come around is like he's talking, he's at the grave at the beginning and at the end, and then his mom appears. It's like only in fiction that your mom appears and they have a final thing there, which isn't all touchy-feely. There's good and bad to it. But yeah, so that one, it's like 7 minutes, and it's comedic, but it's like I guess you would call it like a dramedy. I seems to be a lot of, I guess, I don't know what you think because you read that book, the Book of Outcasts, but a lot of my stuff tends to fall in that, or some people say like comedy horror or comedy. This one's a little lighter, this short film. But I mean, like the one I just told you about, the Jesuit, is probably at least as dark as anything in the Book of Outcasts, or maybe more. So I don't know why, but that seems to be the mode I seem to write in or create in. It's not like it's an intentional thing. It's just that's what, yeah.
But I mean, that's where interest lies, right? In those extremes, kind of thing. Because life, death, everyone experiences it, right? And it's lots of people don't talk about it. And I think that's how people get sort of stuck in their heads trying to avoid dealing with these difficult conversations. And I think that's what writing is. One of the things writing is for, right? Is to find a way to talk about things that people avoid discussing.
I'm glad you said that. That's very comforting, because I never know. Sometimes I'm out there in the wilderness, and like I said, it's hard to say. And I agree with all the stuff you're saying, but it's just a lot of times it's hard. I don't know if you have this experience. It's hard to. I'm always a little in my head sometimes about how are people going to take this. How is this going to come across? And yeah, I know you shouldn't be that way, but and I've worked on myself to get better at it, to get where I'm at now. But I agree. Sometimes you get people saying, "Oh man, this is too dark," or "This is your therapy," or "This is blah 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 blah." Fill in the blanks. But like you said, I feel life is essentially comedic and tragic at the same
Mm-hmm.
time in a certain sense. It's like two sides of the same coin. So when you're playing both registers, that often feels true to the tenor
Mm-hmm.
of our existence, which is often that way. It's an absurd, it's kind of like people say Kafka-esque or something, but that is often how things, I don't know, come across to me. How events unfold. So, but the interesting part to me is that a lot of times, like I showed that story I just mentioned about the Jehovah's Witness to my friend. And he said, "Oh, this is really dark and stuff." And in my head, it wasn't particularly dark. Like it was just, I didn't even think of it that way. I don't know. Once he said it, I looked back. I said, okay, I could see how someone would say that, but I don't know. It was just, I thought it was more like accurate.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I haven't read it, but from what you said, that structure sounds very believable, right? Like I think if you had 2 years, a year to live, you wouldn't want to think about spirituality first thing, right? You got living to do first.
Exactly. And there's people like that who are down in the dumps and become jaded for whatever reason, especially if you don't have a long to live. You can alienate you even further. Now, people have but someone in that extreme emotional state might then go back and, based on circumstances, actually want to get religious. So it's possible. But again, that story it kind of came organically. I never wrote down, this is what I'm going to write a story about this. It just started as I was writing, kind of finding the way, took some stuff out, changed, like that. But it wasn't like I sat down to say, okay, here's a story about this. No, that's not, I don't know, that's just not my process. Yeah. I kind of find it in the doing it.
How different do you see acting and performing comedy?
Like stand-up, it's extremely different. Extremely. I almost think there's very different. But there are like in anything, could be some cross fertilization. So, for example, if you were acting in a scene where they allowed you improv, say like a comedy short film or something, and they allowed the actors to go off script, which sometimes they do, then stand-up would be very useful, because with stand-up, it depends on the stand-up, but for myself particularly, I always keep open to some improv aspect of it, and to the situational stuff, and some of it's rehashed kind of stuff that I've done, but it changes a lot. So I've gotten better at improvisation, and calling out the moment, being real in the moment, calling out the situation that we're in. So some of those skills that could be useful when you're doing an improv and on the acting world, like when they're allowing for that. I'd say that would be the best benefit of stand-up for acting, improvisational acting. But other than that, there's a lot of other things that are different. For example, with acting, you got to be careful. With stand-up, you can really lean into a joke. If you're making a joke, you're conveying it. But when you're in a scene, if it's too jokey, in my opinion, sometimes it falls flat because you're trying to get the joke. You have to be real. You have to play it straight more, I think. I mean, there's exceptions, of course, but a lot of the time you have to play it. You're engaged in the scene. You play it real. You don't play it like you're going for the laughs, and you get more laughs. So it's kind of like a different process. That's with comedy. And with drama, the one thing I'd say, I guess the other thing that I would say that is similar. There's some similarities and some differences. Would be sometimes you've got to with stand up, you got to convey the emotion, or you got to bring across, at least for me, I know, like a more direct or more primal, visceral part of yourself sometimes. Like you have to just like forget the script, or it's kind of the script, but it's a little more raw, and you're being more raw. Then people start laughing for whatever reason. It seems too, even if it's the greatest joke, sometimes it's too intellectual. I've noticed a lot. Sometimes the audiences don't laugh. They need to see some. They need to feel like this is real.
Yeah.
And so that could be, it could be useful too for acting, because to get that across, to convey that, it's kind of like acting. You're showing those emotions and stuff.
Yeah.
And acting, you have to show those emotions. You have to make it feel real. So there are, I don't know, it's a weird thing. There's a lot of things that are similar, and then there's some things which are countervalent, and they work against each other. So that's the best way I can describe it.
With something like comedy, often, even though everyone knows these jokes aren't all improvised, part of the game is you're kind of pretending they are, right, in the audience. So that's often how it feels. Which is nice.
And some comedians I see that are great comedians don't do that as much. It really depends on their style, and they pretty much do their script, and they don't try to make it seem too improvised. And if they're really good jokes, they sometimes they do that purposely because they want the jokes to work anywhere. It's fine a lot of the time, but my personal style is more that, and I don't know that's for everybody. I think with stand-up, there's so many different ways to do it, but I like to make it feel almost like it's real. Like sometimes I'll just cut out. I make it feel like I'm just talking sometimes. Depends on this crowd and the scenario. And again, with that, what I found, and this is basically with all my creative stuff, I go by instinct. Even though I have scripts and I'll have like set lists and stuff, I go up there, I sometimes go off. And then also you have to, because sometimes someone will heckle, something will happen, someone will drop a drink, they'll laugh bigger at this thing, which they don't usually laugh at this time. So each time you've got to be, with stand-up in particular, of all the things I've ever done, you've got to be flexible. You've got to have a little bit of a go with the flow kind of mentality, because you never know what exactly you're walking into. And so that's what I try. It's almost like being a dancer or being like a bullfighter. Okay, the bull went there, I went here. All right. You're making it up a little bit. Yeah. And so that's how I go about that. But writing could be is a little different, because you have many chances at it, and you can perfect it more and revise. Stand up, I feel, is more like the Wild West. I don't, because you do stand up too, right? Isn't that how you feel?
Yeah, I do a little bit. Yeah. It's that makes a lot of sense, right? I think. Yeah, if it's too much in the, it's like with anything, right? If it's too much in the head, it doesn't work. It's not something I've done a lot of or for very long, but I think that was I think the hardest lesson to learn when I started was you can write the best jokes you've ever written at home, but that's no guarantee they're gonna work on the stage every time, right? And it's being in the room is the key thing, and I think it's
that's a huge part of it. Sometimes it could be a worse joke. In my mind, some of the jokes that land more, I still don't understand sometimes. I'm like, why does this bit work so much? I like this other one. I'll come up with this bit, and I'll think, oh, this is great. They're going to love this. This is brilliant. And then nothing. Now it could be I'm in Alabama. They're not that smart. I feel some of these jokes will work better in New York. It's a more cerebral crowd. But in general, this is my opinion, with stand-up, even though I do dark stuff there too, at the end of the day, you got to get laughs. It's a little bit more of like being a plumber. With writing, you want to stay true to yourself, of course. You want to stay true to what you think is funny and what is, but you also do have like a responsibility to get a certain amount of laughs. Whereas the other stuff is a little more ethereal. Like I write this book, the Book of Outcasts. My only real response, unless you're thinking marketing, I was just putting out what I think are interesting stories. And that's where it ends for me. I don't really have, that's it. I don't it's not like stand up where I can do whatever I want that's interesting, but I also have there's a requirement there of like a certain amount of laughs. So it's a little bit more blue collar, in my opinion, you know, of a thing, because there's always that mandate. You can do whatever you want. You can talk about politics. You can punch your dick out for 2 hours. You can, you know, rip your hair out. You can whatever you want to do. You can have 10 minutes of rape jokes. It doesn't matter. But if it's got to get laughs. People got to be with you. You know, that's a unique art. I guess it's an art, you know, in a way, art form in that regard, where there is that. I mean, you can bomb, but there is sort of that requirement. I don't think anything else. Like Picasso puts a painting, it's not like he has to get X, Y, Z. It's just his painting. This is Guernica, you know. So, but stand up, there is always that thing
you
of
get
it.
that
So,
feedback immediately as well, right? If it's failing, you know, right? Whereas with a story, it's gone, it's away, it's in someone else's hands, kind of thing.
Right, exactly. You get the feedback immediate, and of course, certain things work better in certain crowds. But over time, the great part about stand-up is you start developing. Okay, I see this one is people are reacting to this for whatever reason, and then you can develop those, and you get your A team, kind of. You know, these jokes have hit the most in the most places, or this joke works in this kind of room. So you develop a sense of what is going to work. But yeah, there's always still, even having said all that, even with stand-up, sometimes you're like, oh, this might not work, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to do it. And I think that's important too, to have some of that, as long as you can get them at some point, you know. So sometimes I'll do a joke that I think might not be popular, so it's not like I don't want to pander. I don't think I pander. I hope I don't pander. So at the same time, I try not to pander, even in stand up. But I look at it this way: if I have 2 hours of material, okay, which of my material would work for this crowd? You see what I'm saying? Now, it doesn't mean I don't want to put out any material that I don't think. In other words, that I don't believe in some sense, or like it to a certain extent. So it's just, you can still be strategic about it and still stay true to yourself. I believe, you know what I mean, and convey something about who you are. Like lately, I've been doing a lot more self-deprecating and on myself. Not that I've always done some of that, but I've gone deeper into it, and that seems. That can be overdone too, but that seems to be hitting pretty well. And so it is what it is. Sometimes there's other stuff I want to talk about sometimes, and I'm sometimes hesitant because, like I said, you've got to get the laughs. At the end of the day, you've got to get the laughs. And it's hard enough to get the solid laughs. I want to get good laughs. When I'm out there, it's a performance. So I'm going to listen to what the crowd is liking, and I'm going to somewhat keep that in mind. I don't know. You tell me, though. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe you should just, I haven't figured this out. I should just ignore the crowd and just stay true exactly to what I want to do. It's a tough one. I don't know.
But that's kind of the difference between like theater and stand-up, right? Like, is that,
I guess so.
It's not a script, it's a show. Maybe that's sort of a simple way to put it down.
No, I think so. I think so. Yeah, it's a show, and I mean, my favorite part of stand-up, honestly, is that the immediacy. Like, that's my favorite part. The stuff that's in the moment. Sometimes you come up with stuff. You know, the host will say something, and then you go on a riff about it for 3 minutes, and you're getting laughs. Sometimes that works better than the whole stuff you've been spending years working on. And you're like, what the hell? Because it was in the moment, and people were there, and it seemed outside the box. You know, it seemed real. But that ability to do that play, that, like, let's create it now, that's the magic of, above all, for me, for stand-up.
And I think that's got to help as exercise for a writer as well, right? Just it's all words, it's all expression, it's all sort of finding the best way to say something in language in the moment, that definitely is going to help finding the best way to say something when you're sat down at a desk trying to write a story, right? You're exercising those muscles far more.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I never thought of that because I'm thinking pure jokes versus story. But yeah, you're right. I think either way you're communicating, you're presenting. Presentation is always half the battle with stand-up. It's like I'm still working on jokes that I started, my first couple of years. In other words, it's not that same joke, but it'll have like pieces on that. Like I have jokes about me being an actor and various stuff, and I had this joke, that joke, that joke, and then it's putting them together in different ways. So it's like, oh, I have 2 minutes on this chunk on this, whatever. But I'm still working on stuff from, you know what I mean? Because I'll vary it and I'll put this here, I'll put that. I'll add in this part, whatever, And and the crowd too, if they're not feeling this, I'll cut it short and I'll go to that. So that's kind of like, it's a weird process of how I do it, but it'll really depend. It's all by like instinct in the moment. Sometimes I'll just do one line and I'll go on to the next thing because I didn't feel like they felt that or something. I don't know. So, but
that's kind of live editing, right? As well, it's you're editing the material as you're making it. So.
I mean, you get a hot crowd. Everything's easier. You know what I mean? You could sort of pace, but a lot of these rooms I do. Yeah, that's how I do it. I edit, but I have certain things in mind. Like I have certain ones that I could use at the end, like closers or certain opening bits that. Now, sometimes I'll just start riffing for 3 minutes before I get to the opening bit. It depends where the advantage I've gotten better at is seeing more and more crowds. So the more crowds you see, the more rooms you do. It's like a spidey sense or something. You get a vibe on what might work, and sometimes it's not always right. But but more times than not, you got a vibe of like, okay, this room. Especially if I don't go first. Going first and there's not much warm up, then you might have issues because you haven't had a chance to read the room. Yeah. But if you're like third or fourth in a lineup, like a mixed bill show, and there's a host, I can usually see a lot already. I can tell, what kind of stuff will work or how to bring it in. You see what I'm saying? Just because I've seen enough rooms like this. Yeah. So I think that's great with creativity and, continually doing it, putting it out there, getting reps in, as they say in stand-up, or writing. You get better. I don't know if you found that.
Yeah, yourself, it's like with anything really. The more you do it, unless you're doing it really badly, the more you do something, the better that you get, right? I think.
Right.
Yeah, it's. Creativity. It's kind of a muscle, right? And is it in the brain, in the soul, in the heart? Who knows? But it's something you can work on or again or not. Some people just can't. It's there. And that's what the AI is all for.
In case it's out in time, I'm not sure. There's the Impact Book Festival, June 14th. And if it's not out in time, well, you can see the pictures online or something. But I'm doing a lecture, actually. I don't usually do something like that, on humor writing, as well as a book signing, here in Fultondale Center. And June 17th, June 18th, and June 20th, I'll be at Tropicana Hotel in Atlantic City. June 19th at the Resorts Casino in Atlantic City. And the others are also Atlantic City. And then after that, I'll be in New York. I got a bunch of gigs. You can check out my calendar at mattnagin.com, Nagin. And yeah, it's the N word you can say. All right. But so yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Scott. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your review. It was a fantastic, thoughtful review. You of course, you show pluses and negatives, but honestly, I had, I think, 5 reviews, and yours was the most in-depth and the most interesting. Like, it was
Thank you.
all, so thank you for that. And if you want to check out my book, Book of Outcasts, or my other books on Amazon, Kindle, BNN. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much. That's great.